Are you ready to read Dooley and the Snortsnoot?
Dooley and the Snortsnoot by Jack Kent. There once was a family of giants. The father giant was taller than a 2-story building. The mother giant was almost that tall. They had a son named Dooley, who wasn't any bigger than you. Now, while your size is just right for you, it's a bit small for a giant. Dooley's mother and father worried about him. Mother said, "Eat your vegetables, Dooley, so you'll grow big and strong like your father." But it was plain to see it was going to take an awful lot of vegetables. Dooley did as he was told, but nothing seemed to help. He never got any bigger. "I'll always be little," said Dooley, and he started to cry. "Little or big, you're still a giant," Father reminded him. "And giants don't cry. Giants are brave." It's hard to be brave when you're not very big. But Father was right. Dooley was a giant, whatever his size. One of the things that giants do is say fee, fi, fo, fum at people and scare them half out of their wits. This makes giants feel important. And when you feel important, you feel big. So, one day, Dooley went into the village to scare somebody. The first person Dooley saw was a little girl named Trina. Dooley stood up on tiptoe to make himself as tall as he could, made a scowly face, and said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." Trina giggled. "I'm a giant," Dooley declared. "Not a very scary one," said Trina. Then, quite suddenly, she shouted, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." Dooley was so startled he jumped a foot. "That's the way you do it," said Trina. Some other children came over to ask what was going on. "We're being giants," Trina explained. So all the children who had been wondering what to play next anyway went around on their tiptoes singing fee, fi, fo, fum, and Dooley had to admit that most of them did it better than he could. After a while, they got tired of being giants and played tag instead. Dooley was it most of the time. Dooley went into the village and played with the other children quite often after that. He enjoyed their company, but he wasn't very good at their games. When they played baseball, he was first one out. When they ran a race, he was last one in. When they play hide-and-go-seek, Dooley was always the first one found. He did the best he could, though, and it was fun, even if he didn't ever win. But every once in a while, Dooley would remember that he was a giant, and giants like to feel important. So he would say, "Fee, fi, fo, fum," and the children would look up from their games and say, "Not bad, Dooley. Keep trying. Who wants to play blind man's bluff?" But Dooley couldn't help being discouraged. One day their play was interrupted by an awful snarling and snorting. From around the corner came the terrible, snarly Snortsnoot, who eats little children for lunch. He was gnashing his teeth and thrashing his tail and breathing fire. He was a terrible sight to see. The children turned and ran with the Snortsnoot snarling at their heels. Poor little Trina tripped over a rock and fell down. And with 2 snorts and a snarl, the Snortsnoot leaped and caught her. He licked his lips and got ready to eat her. "We've got to save Trina," shouted Dooley. "How can we?" asked the other children, quivering with fear. Dooley didn't know. He was just as frightened as they were, but he ran toward the Snortsnoot, determined to do the best he could. He looked at the Snortsnoot's fierce claws and shivered. He looked at the Snortsnoot's wicked teeth and quaked. And then he took a deep breath and stomped on the monster's tail. The Snortsnoot gave a bellow and dropped Trina. He scowled a terrible scowl, and he growled a terrible growl as he turned and went after Dooley. One lunch was as good as another. He'd eat Dooley instead of Trina. Dooley started to run, but then he remembered that he was a giant, and giants are brave. Giants don't run from Snortsnoots, no matter how snarly. So Dooley stopped running and stood still. The Snortsnoot opened his mouth to gobble Dooley whole. Then all of a sudden, Dooley said, "Fee-fi-fo-fum," right in the monster's face. The Snortsnoot was so surprised he forgot to gobble. Then he remembered and opened his mouth again to swallow Dooley. But something remarkable had happened. Dooley had grown almost a foot taller. "So much the better," thought the Snortsnoot. "He'll make a bigger lunch for me." And the Snortsnoot opened his mouth wider. "Fee-fi-fo-fum," said Dooley again, and he grew another foot. The Snortsnoot opened his mouth as wide as he could, but Dooley was growing too fast. "Fee," said Dooley, and grew 3 feet. "Fi," said Dooley, and grew 4 more. "Fo," said Dooley, and there was no longer any doubt Dooley was a giant. By the time he reached fum, Dooley was so big he could have swallowed the Snortsnoot. The Snortsnoot, who wasn't feeling very snarly anymore, or hungry either, turned and ran and was never heard of again. Nobody knew for sure what made Dooley grow. His mother said it was because he ate his vegetables, and no doubt that helped. "I think," said Dooley's father, "it was because he did a very big thing." "I think I just grew up because it was time to," said Dooley modestly. "Anyway," said Trina, "you were very brave. Come on, Dooley, let's play King of the Mountain. You can be the king." The end.